Welcome back, everybody. We've got another deep dive ready to go. And wow, did you guys send in a lot of articles about data breaches this time?
Yeah, looks like it's been a busy month for cyber
For
criminals.
sure.
Yeah.
Nokia, the Internet Archive, even the Italian government. We're talking hundreds of thousands, even millions of people affected by these breaches.
It just goes to show no one is immune to these kinds of threats, and the ways they're pulling them off are getting more and more complex.
Definitely. So let's jump right in and start with that Nokia breach. They got hit through one of their contractors, right? Like some sort of backdoor thing.
Exactly. A third-party contractor was the weak link in the chain, and that gave the attackers a way into some of Nokia's internal systems.
Okay.
And it wasn't just your run-of-the-mill information that got out either. We're talking SSH keys.
Those like digital keys to get into their servers, right?
Exactly, like a master key. And on top of that, they also got their hands on source code and even login credentials.
So not just someone's email and password, but the keys to the whole kingdom.
You got it. And this situation really highlights how important what we call third-party risk management is. Companies put so much effort into securing their own systems, but they don't always check out the security practices of their partners and contractors.
And they can leave them wide open.
It's like having a top-notch security system but leaving a window wide open.
Exactly. So any updates on the Nokia situation?
Well, Nokia's still looking into it, trying to figure out the full impact, but here's what we know so far. The hacker goes by the name Intel Broker, and they've been known to target big names like Apple and AMD too. Get this, they're trying to sell all that stolen data for just 20 grand on the dark web.
$20,000. That seems awfully cheap for company secrets, especially from a giant like Nokia.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But remember, cybercrime isn't always about making the most money possible. Sometimes it's about quick wins and moving on to the next target. Those can be even harder to track.
It's pretty unsettling. Honestly, this whole thing makes me think about all the companies I do business with. Do they even think about the security practices of their vendors and contractors? It makes you wonder.
That's a great question, and frankly, one we should all be asking. Individuals and businesses should be demanded more transparency from the companies they're trusting with their data.
All right, let's move on to another big breach. This one hit Landmark Admin, an insurance provider in Texas. Over 800,000 people might be affected.
And the data they lost is especially worrying. Names, addresses, social security numbers, financial info, and even medical records. It's the kind of stuff that could really hurt people if it falls into the wrong hands.
And to make matters worse, the attackers got back into Landmark's systems even while they were investigating the first breach. Talk about adding insult to injury.
This shows another trend we're seeing more of. Attackers are sticking around inside compromised systems. They're not just breaking in, grabbing stuff and running. They're digging in deeper, planting back doors and covering their tracks. It's a never-ending game of cat and mouse trying to get rid of them once they're in.
So it's less like a quick smash and grab and more like they're settling in for the long haul.
Exactly. And that makes it even tougher for companies to respond effectively.
So what's Landmark doing about it?
They're offering credit monitoring and identity theft protection to those affected. But is that enough? Once that data is out there, it's out there.
It's a scary thought.
It really is. This just shows how important it is for companies to have strong security measures in place from the get-go. Investing in cybersecurity shouldn't be an afterthought.
Yeah.
It needs to be a top priority for any organization that handles sensitive personal data.
Okay, let's hop over to Europe for a minute.
Yeah.
Both Italy and France have had some big data breaches recently, but they're pretty different.
You're right. In Italy, a private agency was targeting politicians specifically. The Italian foreign minister called it a threat to democracy.
Wow, it sounds like a plot from a spy movie. What does that kind of breach mean for a country?
Well, it raises serious concerns about the integrity of their elections and government. If they're targeting political figures for their data, it could be used for blackmail or to spread misinformation or even to influence election results.
So this isn't just about stealing money or identities.
Yeah.
It's about messing with power and trust.
Absolutely. This case really shows how important it is to have strong security around political figures and government systems.
Now in France, their second largest internet provider, Free, got hit by a cyber attack, 19 million accounts. But Free says no passwords or financial details were taken. Is that even possible?
It is possible. The attackers might have been after different kinds of data, maybe browsing history or personal messages or something that could be used for those targeted phishing scams we've talked about before.
So even if they didn't get the most valuable stuff, this breach is still a huge deal, right?
Absolutely. Any data breach is a major event for a company. They might face lawsuits, damage to their reputation, and the headache of notifying everyone who is affected. Then there's the cost of investigating the breach and putting new security measures in place.
It's a whole mess. Let's talk about a breach that really hit home for a lot of people, the Internet Archive. The nonprofit that keeps all that digital history and makes knowledge available to everyone.
It's pretty ironic, isn't it? And to make matters worse, this was their second attack in just 1 year. Over 31 million user accounts were compromised.
It's like breaking into a library and trashing the card catalog.
Oh.
What's being done to help organizations like the Internet Archive beef up their security? I mean, they probably don't have the same resources as a Fortune 500 company, right?
True, they often operate on tight budgets with limited staff. But this does raise an important question. Should organizations like the Internet Archive, they're basically looking after our shared digital history, be given more support, maybe even government funding to strengthen their cybersecurity?
It's definitely something to think about. All right, let's shift gears and talk about a couple of breaches that hit closer to home for a lot of us. Ticketmaster and AT&T. Remember all those headlines? Well, there's been a new development in those cases.
Yeah. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police made an arrest in connection with those attacks, and over 100 others, apparently. They say the suspect was using something called InfoStealer malware.
InfoStealer malware? What in the world is that?
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's designed to steal information from infected devices, things like login credentials, credit card numbers, and other sensitive data. In this case, they're saying the suspect used it to get into user accounts at Ticketmaster and AT&T.
And the investigation found that a lack of multi-factor authentication played a big part in these breaches. You mean something as simple as a second layer of security could have stopped this whole thing?
It really highlights how important that extra layer of protection is. Strong passwords alone aren't always enough. We all need to be using multi-factor authentication whenever it's available. Think of it this way. You wouldn't lock your front door and leave your back door wide open, right? You need multiple layers of security for your accounts, too.
Makes sense. So it's not just about having a super strong password anymore. You need that extra step, the verification code or whatever. That actually reminds me of something else you sent over about CAPI-TCHA, those I'm not a robot things. I read that hackers are using fake versions of those to spread malware.
Yeah, that's right. It's a pretty sneaky tactic because it plays on what we're used to doing online. We're so conditioned to just click through those CAPI-CHA tests without thinking.
So they're not just about identifying blurry pictures or solving a little puzzle anymore.
Nope. What's happened is these cyber criminals are making fake CAPI-CHA tests that look totally real. But when you click on them, instead of proving you're human, you're actually downloading malicious code onto your device.
Oh, wow. So what kind of malware are we talking about here?
There are a few different kinds going around, but two of the most common are Luma and Amity. They're both nasty pieces of work.
Right.
They can steal your personal info, drain your crypto wallets, and even give the attackers control of your device remotely.
Yikes. Okay, that's definitely making me rethink how quickly I click through those CAPI-TCHA tests. So what can we do to protect ourselves?
The key is to be careful. Watch out for CAPI-CHA tests on websites that seem sketchy, especially if they're hosting pirated stuff or adult content or have tons of flashy ads. Those are usually red flags. And always take a second to look at the website itself. Does anything look off? Is the CAPI-CHA test in a weird spot? If so, it's best to just play it safe and get out of there.
Good advice. It's a good reminder to slow down and pay attention when we're online. We tend to rush through things, especially those security checks. Speaking of tricks, this next story is a wild one. It's about something called fake call malware, and it sounds like something straight out of a cybersecurity nightmare.
Fake call is a particularly nasty type of Android malware. We've seen those banking Trojans before, the ones that steal your login info. But fake call takes it a step further. It can actually intercept your calls to bank customer support.
Hold on, what? How is that even possible?
It uses a feature in the Android system called Accessibility Service. This feature is meant to help people with disabilities, but in the wrong hands, it can be used to take control of certain phone functions.
So they're taking something meant to be helpful and using it for evil classic.
Unfortunately, yeah. Fake call uses Accessibility Service to keep an eye on your calls. And when you try to call your bank's customer support, it redirects the call to the attackers.
So I think I'm talking to my bank, but I'm actually talking to a scammer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And get this, fake call doesn't just redirect outgoing calls. It can also make fake incoming calls. So you might get a call that looks and sounds totally legit with your bank's name and logo on the screen, but it's all a fake. It's all designed to trick you into giving up your personal information.
It's like a double whammy. They block you from reaching real support and then trick you into calling them instead. That's messed up.
It is. And it shows how important it is to be super careful anytime you're dealing with your financial information. Don't just rely on caller ID or what you see on your screen. Always double check the number. And if anything feels off, just hang up and call your bank directly using the number on your card or their website.
This deep dive is really making me think. We've talked about huge companies, nonprofits, everyday people. It seems like everyone's a target. It can feel kind of overwhelming, honestly. Is there a common thread running through all these breaches, something that can help us make sense of it all?
Yeah, it can feel kind of overwhelming. Is there like a common thread running through all these breaches? Something that can help us make sense of it all?
If you take a step back and look at the big picture, one thing really stands out. The common denominator in a lot of these breaches is trust.
Trust.
Exactly. Think about it. Whether it's trusting a third-party contractor or clicking on a CAPI without thinking or answering a call that looks like it's from your bank. Cybercriminals are really good at exploiting the trust we have in systems and in each other.
That's an interesting way to look at it. So it's not just about building stronger defenses. It's also about being more aware of how our own actions can make us vulnerable. Exactly. Awareness is key. We need to be more careful about who we trust with our data and more skeptical of anything that seems even a little bit off online. It's about moving from just blindly trusted things to being actively vigilant.
Okay, so vigilance is important, but what else can we actually do to protect ourselves?
Mm.
I'm already feeling a little overwhelmed just hearing about all these breaches.
I get it. It's a lot to take in. But there are some simple things you can do to really improve your security. First things first, enable multi-factor authentication on all your important accounts.
Like add that extra layer of security we talked about.
Exactly. It makes it way harder for hackers to get in, even if they have your password.
And another thing, be sure to keep your software updated.
All right, those updates that pop up all the time.
Yeah, those often include security patches that fix vulnerabilities, so don't ignore them.
Yeah.
And last but not least, be really careful about the links you click and the files you download. If something seems fishy, even if it's from someone you know, don't click on it.
It sounds like common sense goes a long way, but maybe with a little healthy paranoia mixed in. You could say that. In the digital world, it's always better to be safe than sorry. And remember, the more you know about the threats out there, the better you can protect yourself.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We've covered so much from those massive breaches at big companies to that sneaky malware that can take over your phone. What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
If I had to boil it down to one key message, it's this: cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not just about tech solutions or company policies. It's about each of us taking ownership of our digital security and being proactive.
We can't just rely on companies or the government to keep us safe. We have to do our part too.
Exactly. By understanding the threats, using good security practices, and just being more aware online, we can all help make the digital world a safer place.
Well said. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been a bit of a wake-up call, but it's also empowering to know that we're not helpless against these threats. To all our listeners out there, keep learning, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there in the digital world.